Welcome back. More from the courts in a moment. But first, over the last few days, the international consultancy Bain and Co has published several full-page adverts in newspapers appealing to people to hear their side of the story after they were found to have played a role in deliberately sabotaging SARS during the state capture era. Bain eventually apologised for its role. That saw its South African partner at the time, Vittorio Massone, meeting with then President Jacob Zuma several times before Zuma appointed Tom Moyane as SARS Commissioner. Massone then helped Moyane to weaken SARS. Eventually, Bain Co paid back the money it had been paid by SARS. Tebogo Khaas is a political commentator and trustee of the public organisation Public Interest SA. Tebogo, good afternoon to you. You've responded to this. How do you feel about these adverts that Bain have published? They must have cost a lot of money.
Good afternoon, Stephen. This is quite disquieting, especially if you learn also that Bain has never made any effort to get in touch with SARS, the victim in this instance. Well, we are taxpayers, the ultimate victims, but the customer here was SARS, to try and see what else can be done to make amends for their indiscretions, if I may call it that. But to also go and buy such an advert as they did, which we found very much in bad taste, in the sense that they seem to not want to admit to the wrongfulness of their conduct. In fact, it's a non-apology apology.
I'm sort of struck. Bain keeps saying, we want to be heard, we want to be heard. Fine. But being heard also requires, and accountability also requires, answering questions. And look, maybe I've just missed them, but I haven't seen anyone from Bain doing any broadcast interviews anywhere.
They've gone silent. They buried their head in the sand, and you're quite right. Until recently, of course, these two statements, we haven't had or seen anybody from Bain say anything about SARS. In fact, we've just had people comment around Bain, including the PLSA, for example. And quite honestly, we believe that Bain might actually be missing an opportunity to engage and come out clean on this matter, and even help SARS and South Africa to come out of a bad era. And yes, Bain is just putting themselves in. We've reached out to Bain since in the last year, Stephen. We haven't had a thing, not even acknowledgement of receipt of any of our communication.
What kind of questions do you think they need to answer? I mean, yes, there have been findings about their role at various commissions, but what kind of questions do you think they need to answer to us, the public?
Primary for me is, to the extent that they say they didn't know of the conduct of Massone's criminal conduct, I would like to know, when did they become aware of that criminal conduct? And upon their knowing, what did they do about that? And secondly, why didn't they avail themselves or anyone to go and appear and testify at the Newzroom Commission? They only submitted an affidavit. We all know what an affidavit means. It can be accepted as evidence and all that. But if you need to, it needs to be talked through, or even somebody needs to be cross-examined, whoever deposed of the affidavit, to actually get to the bottom of the veracity of what it is that they've deposed of. But instead, we saw Massone get into a plane. Off he went. He was welcomed with open hands, and go get a huge payout from Bain, and he's gone somewhere in a cushy job. So I would like to know from them, to the extent that they say it was a serious mistake, when did they get to know about this so-called serious mistake, and what did they do? And to the extent that they may have known after the Newzroom Commission had concluded, they sure knew before or during the Zondo Commission progression. Did they avail themselves of that process to say, this is our version, here our truth, this is what we believe we can bring to the party, especially after Arthur Williams testified to the Zondo Commission. So I would like to know, why didn't they avail themselves of that opportunity as well?
I mean, it seems to me they keep saying we didn't know. But even in international terms, the SARS account was a big account. I mean, you're restructuring the whole country's tax service. SARS really matters. I mean, the basis of our state, there are probably two bases of our state, SARS and the NPA. And yet they claim they didn't know. I have to say, I'm going to scratch my head because banging it against the table is sore. I find it hard to believe them when they say that.
Stephen, ignorance is not a defense in law. I'm not a law student. I was never a law student, or am I a lawyer? But I do know for a fact that legally, ignorance is not a defense in law, so they say. And to the extent that they say they didn't know, now that they knew, they became aware to the extent that they repaid the amounts in 2018. That was before the Zondo Commission, I think, started. So they ought to have actually now said, now that we know, we want to come clean. And this is what we know after the fact, and this is what we can do to help you find the truth and get to the bottom of it all and help South Africa to plug the loopholes that they may have identified insofar as supply chain management and procurement in government is concerned. And yes, I mean, Bain, SARS itself was not a small account insofar as Bain is concerned, at least not in South Africa. It was quite a huge account. And that they actually even went and assumed that account knowing full well that they don't have the capacity to deliver. And it was unnecessary. So in other words, they were selling South Africa a product or a service that which we didn't need and we could ill afford to even have. So what did they do with that knowledge and the guilt thereof? And by the way, it is not only the 164 or whatever it is that they generated in fees from SARS that is at issue here. At issue here is the fact that they destroyed SARS to the extent that SARS capabilities to chase custom tax defaulters was eroded. I mean, we had cigarette smuggling go up after Bain started work, or after Moyane started work at SARS, and because SARS was hollowed out, the capacity to be able to function was destroyed, and as a result, the state lost more than what it had actually paid by way of fees to Bain, and Bain must assume responsibility and seek or offer reparations.
Tebogo Khaas, thank you, political commentator and trustee of the organisation Public Interest SA. Really appreciate the time.